It really seems like there's a rise in local crime. Can you talk to us? Is that a real thing or is that just a perception?
You know, it is. It's definitely, we have seen a larger increase in a lot of cases. I think the biggest one that can directly affect a lot of us in this community is the population growth. Mm-hmm. You know, when you take a county that is essentially, you know, in that 70 to 80,000 mark that we were all kind of used to, and then over the last couple of years we saw this mass expansion, now recorded as one of the fastest growing communities and the fastest growing city in the state of Montana. So with that, you know, becomes a lot more call volume. So, you know, in the last, you know, since about 2019, we've seen about 6,000 more calls for service per year. Specifically, I would say that we're seeing more calls of violence. You know, we had 6 OIS's officer-involved shootings this, you know, in about a 6-8 month period, which caused a lot of great concern for our law enforcement and their families. Mm-hmm. And then second of all, we see a pretty big increase in thefts, more of those cases where, you know, weapons might be involved or domestic violence, and so we're dealing with those on a rapidly evolving thing. So yes, increasing crime, and specifically those calls that require additional officers to respond.
I'm seeing headlines from break-ins in the paper every single day. So, you know, as you're doing a huge amount of work to make our community safer, to make it a place we can all be proud to call home. What can we do right now as citizens in Kalispell to make our home and our community safer?
If you see something, say something. You know, when it comes to burglaries or thefts of those types of natures, a lot of that comes down to a couple aspects. You know, vehicle thefts were up recently, and a lot of that education value was to say, you know, take the keys out of the car. A lot of the vehicles that were being stolen were very easy to take because of the keys were in the ignition. When you're talking about homes, a lot of times there's several things you can do. Lighting is a huge portion of it. Just installing a motion light that, you know, interacts with there's somebody outside your residence. The other part is cameras have been a huge part of law enforcement functions now. When we're looking at crimes and solving crimes, we want, you know, the best evidence we can, and so having camera systems that are appropriately installed and that can do that, and they're available on almost any vendor now. Yeah. And then the last part is, you know, is that awareness level. Is, you know, we all are very familiar with our neighborhoods and our residents, and so when something doesn't look right, a lot of times just that small notification, you know, we can then address those problems.
Great. So see something, say something. Lighting, and then the basic cameras that I'm pushing the buttons all the time while I'm out knocking on doors, and it really is a great way. I use them on my house as well. It's a great way to know who's coming and going from your place. But a lot of this crime at some level is related to drugs, and a lot of our drugs are related to mental wellness. So mental wellness is kind of the next topic we're going to jump into. So, Sheriff Heino, my understanding is that a lot of the crime is related to drug use, and a lot of the drug use is often kind of going over the top of a mental wellness issue. It seems like that's something that we need to be jumping in to address in our community, but what's one practical thing that we can be doing for these younger offenders? You
know, our youth are probably our most sensitive group when we're talking about the vulnerabilities and you know, addiction to drugs. That being said, I think also we have a lot of opportunities there to provide better services to those that are maybe getting into that culture and have the opportunity to receive treatment and get out of it. So I think in a lot of cases an approach to looking at better services to that population, or that, you know, we'll call it, you know, 25, 26 and under, has a lot of opportunities there, and I think that's one thing we do not currently have. There isn't a lot of opportunities for those youth, and if they are, they're very costly. I mean, to send them to another state, separated from the family. So I think, you know, as a state, we have a lot of opportunities there to help our younger generations get out of this world.
And just so I can frame this up in a way that we might all kind of understand the context, this sounds a lot like a young person who might get connected in with a harder drug, and they're 16, 17, 18. And I know you guys are doing a lot of work to actually deal with some of these folks that are distributing really right into federal prison. But doesn't that kind of open the door for these younger people to become the next distributor? And is that part of the reason this work is so important, the mental wellness piece?
There's always this transition. So, you take an individual that is selling dangerous drugs in our communities, and a lot of times they're prosecuted under either a federal or state system. But with that, these individuals that have started out as the users are oftentimes, moving up into the world of the sales part. So yeah, shutting down that culture is, one of the most immediate things that we can do. I think the best thing to note now is that the drug culture now is killing individuals. I mean, with fentanyl and methamphetamine and heroin now entering our systems, across borders, and not only that, it's directly affecting our community. This is a life-saving thing that we have to be doing.
Okay, great. So mental wellness, especially for those 25 and under, is a way that we could curtail future increase potentially in drug use and crime as we look at, while you're out dropping the hammer on those distributors and sending them away to the federal prisons. We need to make sure that we're not just putting young people into the pipeline.
Yeah, and there's twofold there. There's drug addiction portion, and then there's the mental health portion, which is a much broader topic, of course, but not only just for the youth, but drug addiction is definitely one that we have a very big opportunity to deal with, and I think additional resources there would greatly help.
Great. So I want to pivot a little bit around the mental wellness. One thing that you have already said is that your officers are not only dealing with higher call volumes right here locally, but we're also dealing with more violent crimes. And I'm guessing that's really taking a toll just on the mental wellness of our officers. Can you talk to me about what kind of resources you need as a local sheriff's office to better serve and back our law enforcement?
And I think to go back in the history, when we had 6 officer-involved shootings, an increase in violent crime, an increase in call volume, you started to notice that every day in our individuals that work in any first responder in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, our sheriff's office made commitments to pay for that directly, to provide psychological counseling services, whatever we could do, maintaining within our budgets. There isn't really a lot on the state sides of things to support those functions, and I think that's an important role. It's a huge cost to train and to retain law enforcement, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, and keeping those individuals in the career, dealing with what they're seeing on a day-to-day basis, from violent crimes to often horrific scenes to, just the stress of a call, every couple of seconds a lot of times. It is important that we evaluate that and make sure that we're providing the best we can to them.
So from a state standpoint as a legislator, that's something that I'm hoping to be looking at, right, is how are we funding and supporting our law enforcement in those practical ways as they go out and serve and protect. That's, I think, a big piece of something our state legislators should be considering and should be looking at seriously in this next session. What are some things that we can be doing at the state legislature to make it more efficient for you to operate here in local government and keeping our communities safe?
I think a lot of grants are available, but the process of receiving those funds, getting it direct down to those that are going to perform the function, it can be done more efficiently in a lot of cases. I think in some cases, for an example, if you apply for a $10,000 grant through the state, oftentimes you're going to have several hours to process the grant application. Then you're going to have it weekly, if not monthly, reports back on those types of things. And I think more direct funding sometimes would be more efficient, meaning if the state were to have those roles, and it was more of a direct one-on-one. Again, staffing issues, all these types of things that we're seeing, creating efficiencies is a lot of things that we can do to better fund and be responsible with tax dollars.
Yeah, simply straight to the source, right? We do that in my business where we have one accounting function and we make sure everything is flowing through that source versus having 2 or 3 layers that it has to go through. So I can see the benefit of that, and it seems like a great way to save the taxpayers some dollars and put your folks out doing the work they do best. So that's a possibility. And then you had also mentioned something about having more of the investigative work being done at the local level. Can you talk to me about that?
So that was more specifically, when we're dealing with ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children, which it is a huge aspect that we're seeing more and more, and important in more functions to protect our children. Mm-hmm. With that being said, I think a lot of times there's funding that comes down, whether it be from the federal or the state side, that trickles down. The work is often done at the bottom levels, meaning the investigations, the collection of the information, and again protecting those children that are involved. With that, I think a lot of that direct funding is pushing that funding to the lowest level is the key mm-hmm. to success in those programs.
Okay, so that's basically right, the small government piece of it. Let's get it straight to the people that are going to do the work, and simplify the bureaucracy where possible. All right, well, thanks so much for being here with me today, and thanks to you folks who are interested in keeping Kalispell a place we can all be proud to call home.